session that we will be having is, the title is, what are the right and effective gender trade policies that will promote more women to participate in formal trade? Really, we start with policy and then we need to do the implementation. And so we do need gender sensitive policies. And so we will have the next session, which is going to be facilitated by two ladies, Rose Ronoh and Caroline Keitany from UNECA. I believe they're here with us. Rose Ronoh and Caroline, I'd like to welcome you on stage. Hi, Rose, how are you?
Hi, Anne, how are you?
I'm doing well, great to have you here. We were waiting for Caroline to join you, or will you start before she comes in, or how would you like to go about doing it?
Yeah, I think Caroline was having a slight challenge with the background, and your team was trying to sort that out. So I think I can start, and if she's going to join, I'm sure she'll be assisted to join in.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rose, for taking the time to come and share with us the work that you're doing at UNECA. So welcome, and we will listen in to the great insights and the work that you're doing on the policy front. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I really appreciate the work that you've been doing. It's really visible. The conference has been wonderful. Last year was a success. This year is also equally a huge success. So just to appreciate that you've kept it going. To introduce myself to the rest who are here, my name is Rose Ronoh. I'm a gender and trade expert with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, specifically the Africa Trade and Policy Center. The Africa Trade Policy Center is assisting African countries to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by helping them to come up with their implementation strategies, providing technical assistance with the CFTA Secretariat to negotiate some aspects. And I think most importantly, the African women have been able to push specifically for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to have a protocol specifically for women and youth. So that's something that really excites me. So I have a presentation. I don't know if it is okay. I can be able to share it. If I have the rights, I should be able to share it. So you let me know if you can be able to see my screen.
Yes, Rose, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So basically the presentation is going to be centered around the work that we are doing. To just give you an understanding of what the CFTA is, but in specifically looking at how women will benefit from the CFTA. My colleague Caro is here. I see she has come in. So in terms of we're going to run this, we're going to do a presentation. Our presentation, we're going to be asking for recommendations on what you think the protocol, the protocol for women could include in terms of policy recommendations. So I'll start with the presentation, but before I start, I'd like my colleague Caroline to introduce herself, and then we can start off. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you, everybody. As Rose has mentioned, we are part of UNECA, and we're here today very excited to talk about the AFCFTA and specifically on the protocol on women and youth. And Rose will be taking us through, and then we'll have a session where we'll talk about, more about what it is that we feel, or you feel specifically, that we should actually join into the protocol. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Caroline. So I know I do not want to take it for granted that everybody knows what the CFTA is. I think it's become a common term now. A lot of people understand it, but you'll be surprised also that not many people also understand what the CFTA is or have a low level of awareness about it. And basically, it's a free trade area that will bring together 54 African countries to create a single market for both goods, services, investment, and basically to promote movement of capital and persons within the continent. And this comes from research that has been done before that the trade happening between African countries is very low at around 16%. But when you look at countries, continents like Europe, you look at the US, you look at Asia, trade between those countries are much higher. So it was a wisdom of the African Union heads of states that this agreement was put in place to just foster increased trade between African countries, and basically to get us out of the aid bondage that we've been in as African countries for a long time. And I really like what the previous speaker said, that an ounce of aid is worth less than, something like that. I need to get that. And I think it's really good that this agreement now focuses on African countries being economically independent, as opposed to focusing on aid. So it entered into force in 2019, May 2019, when 24 countries had ratified. But now we have over 40 countries who have ratified this agreement. And by ratification means that they can be able to trade once all the modalities have been agreed on. We only have one country that is not a signatory of this, and this is Eritrea. But I believe with time they'll be able to join in and be part of this agreement. So why the CFTA, or why the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Mostly is to remove tariffs and also to look at dealing with non-tariff barriers. And just for demystification, what tariffs are: when you're trading with another country, there are import duties, export duties that are charged. And what the CFTA aims to do is to bring down tariffs across 90% of all trade between African countries. Non-tariff barriers are some of restrictions that countries put, for example, quotas. They put requirements of certain certifications. So those non-tariff barriers also with the CFTA are going to come down. So what will this happen? What will this lead to? To lead to access to wider markets. And for example, if you're trading in East Africa, then you have access to trade with West Africa, with South Africa, with northern part of Africa, because now the tariffs have been lowered, and you have preferential treatment when you take your goods to those markets as a result of this agreement. Investments also, there's going to be a lot of investment because of the opening up. The protocol on investment now is being finalized by the African heads of states. So you can be able to not only look at investment within your regional economic community, but you can look at investing in other parts of Africa. Also, in terms of the industrialization, when you look at most countries who have been classified as first world countries, they industrialized before they could be able to get to that level of first world countries. They invested in manufacturing, and they were able to drive industrialization that led to what they are now. In terms of also sectors, expanding sectors, the removal of tariffs will lead to expansion of sectors, and also fostering regional value chains. And by fostering regional value chains here, I mean that you don't have to manufacture everything, within Kenya. You can get a raw material from Nigeria, come to Kenya, put it together, and export it to another, African country. So fostering regional value chains whereby you have different actors making one particular product under the preferential treatment of the low tariffs, that are going to be there under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this will solve a lot of the issues that we have in Africa, job creation, food security. Right now in Kenya, we are dealing with a famine. So with this agreement, fostering increased trade, then you have even better movement of food products from one country to another. And, you can be able to now mitigate, some of those, issues. Also, coherent trade policy. For a long time, African countries, we've not been speaking as one. Even when we are at the WTO, we all have different voices. So this particular agreement looks at African countries, speaking as one, one voice, made in Africa. When you have a product in the shelves, out there, then you should have some preference whereby you say that if I buy this product, then I'm providing employment for an African. So that kind of coherent policy whereby we complement each other as opposed to, fighting against each other. And colonialism has really fostered this incoherence in terms of trade policy, because, our colonial partners really focused on getting raw commodities out of Africa, as opposed to, getting Africa to trade amongst each other. So in terms of the operational instruments, I won't go so much about this, but maybe to mention them, the rules of origin. This is basically what gives, a passport, a commodity from Africa, a passport to say that this is made in Africa. And if it's made in Africa, then it means that it gets preferential treatment in terms of reduced tariffs when it goes to, those African countries. Also, online tariff negotiation, basically with the COVID-19, there was less movement. So an online negotiation platform for tariffs was put in place, and that now is being used. Also, non-tariff barriers mechanism. There is a portal, I think the website is there, you can see on the screen, whereby private sector can be able to report any non-tariff barriers, or barriers that are not related to tariff that is hindering you from trading one way or another. Also, the Pan-African Payment Settlement System is one of the operational instruments, and this is really important because in Africa we are trading with foreign currency. If you do any international trade transaction, then you definitely use the dollar, and when you use the dollar, it means we're losing a lot because we're not using our own African currencies. So Afreximbank has put in place the Pan-African Payment Settlement System that will enable settlement of payments in African currencies. Thereby, we're not losing a lot by using foreign currency. Then the Africa Trade Observatory, also this is one of the instruments that just ensures that there's an online platform to collect, to process, trade between African countries, trade that is happening. And from this information, you can be able to make interventions. You can even be able to see whether the CFTA is working or it's not working. And one of the biggest weaknesses we've had as African countries is that we do not, put data, at the center stage of policy making. So this is really important to be able to inform the direction of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So in terms of the scope of the CFTA, we have trading goods, we have trading services, and then we also have phase 2. So trading goods is what I've talked about: elimination of the tariffs, elimination of non-tariff barriers, negotiation of the rules of origin. Up to now, around 88% has been agreed in terms of the rules of origin. Also, cooperation of customs entities and trade facilitation. In terms of services, this agreement will be looking at transparency and convergences in service regulators, mutual recognition agreements, in terms of licenses, certification of service suppliers, and also progressive liberalization of sectors. There are 5 priority sectors now that have been agreed upon. We have transportation, we have communication, business services, we have tourism, and financial services. So those are priority sectors that, if you would like to invest in this sector, those are sectors that have been prioritized, whereby you can be able to trade or invest in any African country. Then we have the phase 2 issues, which are currently under negotiation, almost completion. We have intellectual property rights, which just ensures that your rights, if you've invented something, if you have, created something, are protected. Then we have investment, which just governs how we can be able to invest in each other's countries. Competition policy is also another protocol that is currently also finalization of negotiation, whereby to just ensure that there isn't any unfair competition amongst African countries, and specifically women are normally big sufferers of this, especially when it comes to intellectual property rights. I think some of you may be knowing about the story of the Kiondo, the African Kiondo, which the intellectual property rights are said, to not be domiciled in Kenya anymore. Then we also have e-commerce. We realize that we are in the 4th industrial revolution, and there's a protocol dedicated to e-commerce to just ensure that we are promoting more trade online. And last but not the least, but the most important, especially when it comes to our session today, is a protocol on women and youth. And this is basically in realization of the challenges that women and youth are faced when it comes to trade. We have lack of access to information, lack of access to finance. We have gender-based discrimination, harassment, especially when you look at informal cross-border traders women form around 70% of them. And basically the injustices that come as a result of African culture, which, does not put the man and the woman on the same pedestal. Then it was the wisdom of, African heads of states that we have a protocol specifically dedicated to women and youth. So in terms of the CFTA, where they're centered on, this is really important, our research that we did as UNECA, to just look at where are the areas that, would have the biggest percentage gains in intra-Africa trade. And you can see there we have agri-food, we have services, we have industry, energy, and mining. So those are the sectors that will have, a huge percentage growth, and those are the sectors that will have a lot of opportunities if you're looking at now taking advantage of the CFTA. Specifically, when it comes to agribusiness, you have cereals, crops, milk, dairy products, sugar, processed food. When it comes to services, we have tourism and transport. When it comes to industry, we have wood, paper, chemicals, rubber, plastics, pharmaceutical products, amongst others. And when it comes to energy and mining, we have refined oil. So this is research that is available. I'm going to be sharing this presentation, then you can be able to have in-depth look at this so that you can be able to better prepare yourselves to leverage it, especially if you belong to these sectors. And to the crux of our discussion today, which is inclusivity, specifically inclusivity, of women for sustainable development. One of the UN SDG goals is gender equality, and the CFTA has recognized this. It has recognized this with the Youth and Women Protocol. But when you look at the sustainability, the CFTA and sustainability, we did a research and we were able to see that the CFTA is going to connect approximately 1.27 billion people. We will have easier African business to trade, and then countries will benefit faster from growth of exports, boosting industrialization, increasing industrialization, also allowing countries to move up value chains, and also 30 million people being lifted out of extreme poverty by 2035. And this is really important because everywhere we turn, we see, Africa being the continent whereby we have a lot of extreme poverty. And this CFTA provides that tool to remove, our African brothers and sisters who are experiencing extreme poverty. Then in terms of looking at the relationship between, trade and inclusion, the importance of women participating cannot be overemphasized, because you see in most African countries, the population of women are even more than men. But when it comes to engagement and provision of equal opportunity, that is not done. You have women not, completing their studies, a lot of them dropping out due to early pregnancies, early marriages. Those who even make it still have to deal with a lot of patriarchy, whereby you have, not equal opportunity given to them, or even they are looked down, as a result, or, as of the perceptions that were there because of patriarchy. So it's really important that countries now focus, come out of that patriarchy and see that they are involving, both populations, both women and men, and looking at women not only as, lesser people, but also looking at them as, a resource that the country can be able to really capitalize on. Last week I was in Eswatini, that is Swaziland, and I was giving them an example of what it means not to include women in trade or even in economic opportunities for a country. And I gave an analogy whereby if you don't include women, and for example, you're going to play football, it's like taking half of your players to go and play with, a team that has all its players. So you, Africa, go to play, if you only include men, you're going to play with 5, while the other countries, outside Africa are playing with all their 11, team members. So that's basically it. African countries need to look and realize that, continuously marginalizing and not including women, then it's costing them, because these are the women who will be able to create the employment opportunities. These are the women who are going to invest. And when you go to any African market, the majority are always women. So it means that there is that potential that has not really been leveraged. And that's where we as UNECA come in to assist in providing, technical support to governments to ensure that the agenda mainstreaming, not only the CFTA, but all other corresponding, strategies, that they are mainstreaming to ensure that there's equal participation. If there are any inequalities that have been realized, strategies are put in place to mitigate against, these inequalities. So the CFTA itself, as I mentioned, recognizes the importance of gender inequality, the gender equality, and specifically focuses on improving export capacity for informal suppliers. I know this workshop is focusing on formal trade, but we have a huge chunk of our sisters. Actually, 70% of informal cross-border trade in Africa are women. So it's important also to look at them and see what are the challenges that they have and how they can be, leveraged or even assisted to take advantage of the CFTA. And a lot of them have low levels of education. They are prone to, being misinformed or being misused. So it's important that policy helps for inclusion, not only of women who are, you'd say women who are at a professional level or formalized level. You'll find that those women are still, they're not very many. Majority of women who are trading or who are doing one form of business or another, a lot of them are in the informal sectors. Also, the CFTA will see, it's been projected that, there will be an increase in exports of female-oriented sectors in manufacturing, agriculture, and value addition. Also, there's a projected increase in intra-African exports, specifically in labor-intensive industries and low-skilled wages. Then strengthening regional value chains. I've talked about non-tariff barriers and also the protocol that has been developed. So just to overemphasize, women in Africa are most likely to be entrepreneurs than men. So the CFTA is squarely, an agreement that really needs to benefit women. So in terms of the opportunities that are there, job creation, the agreement also prevents an opportunity to remove costs and barriers to trade, to encourage entrepreneurship. And for a long time, I think a lot of us have been looking at entrepreneurship as a side hustle or something that you do when you do not have a job, or you've graduated and you've not gotten a job. I think there needs to be a change in how we look at entrepreneurship, that it should be, a dignified profession that somebody can even, take it up immediately, not, be seen as a side hustle. The agreement also seeks to support value addition through regional value chains, linkages, and niche industries. And for a long time, I think African countries, we have been exporting our goods in raw form, not processed or even, value added. So this agreement actually presents that opportunity for us to be able to value add and, sell our products at even better prices than, selling it at raw commodities. Private sector public participation, that has really been happening because as negotiations are ongoing, then the private sector really need to be consulted, because it's an agreement that the government negotiates, but the primary beneficiaries of this agreement are the private sector. Also, digitization will be incentivized, formalization of businesses, addressing of the NTBs, and also highlighting and advancing, complementary policies to support inclusion. And I've talked about access to finance, skills upgrading, and also capacity building. So there's a lot that stands to be gained under this agreement. And it's important that, policy is aligned to ensure that, the opportunities, to ensure that, the implementation strategies ensure that there's equal opportunity for both men and women, and whereby there is, an instance whereby women are not having equal opportunities, then mitigation measures are put in place. Because we're not talking about informal traders, I'm going to move forward to just talk about our approach in terms of national implementation strategies. We have supported over 40 member states of the CFTA to develop their national implementation strategy, including Kenya. And then also in terms of the implementation strategy, the strategies have cross-cutting issues, and gender is really one of them that, you know, is inbuilt in the implementation strategies. And then what we also do as ECA is that we support the sensitization and capacity building for the private sector for the agreement on NTBs, trade remedies, development of sectoral trade, strategies, identifying products, market analysis. So even as we assist to put in place the implementation strategy, the next stage is now to create awareness and to support the private sector to take advantage of this. And that's the reason why we're here today, to just tell you what we do and also just build the capacity around what the CFTA is. And then in terms of opportunities, there are lots of opportunities that are there for women to participate in this. The women need to be part of implementation committees, and I'm happy in Kenya that is happening. When there are capacity building initiatives that are there, then it's important that we have inclusion of women in those capacity building initiatives and training to ensure that this information is passed down. So I'm just going to take you through some of the challenges. We've done consultations in several African countries, and we came up with challenges that most African women face. And I'm going to just go through some of those challenges. And after this, you can bring up a challenge that may not be part of this. And we'll go now to the next stage, whereby we can receive contributions on what you think that the Women and Youth Protocol under the CFTA can include. So some of the challenges that were there that have been highlighted by other women in other forums include, closed airspaces making cost of travel very high, mobile communication being very high, in cost, political instability, language barriers, corruption, currency exchange ability. Then we have protection of intellectual data, then access to finance, lack of coordination amongst organizations across African countries, logistics and transport challenges, lack of skills in digital skills and entrepreneurship skills. Visa restrictions. Is good news now that I think South Africa has granted some visa provisions for Kenya, but we need to see this happening across all African countries, whereby you should be able to travel visa-free to all African countries. Then also lack of productive capacity is also a challenge that was brought out by women traders. Low quality products, lack of trust, low self-confidence, lack of technological know-how, poor coordination, lack of knowledge on regulations that are there for you to participate in trade, the fear of taking risks, prejudice and exploitation by men, lack of information, the natural biological experiences, for example, pregnancy, menopause, breastfeeding, lack of opportunity to value add, lack of education, gender-based violence, and also the responsibility, the care responsibility that women have in the family, which now lessens their time for them to be able to participate in trade. So at this point, I think I would just like to open the floor to just any challenges that you feel that they have been left out, or even your thoughts or questions on the presentation I have made before we can go to the policy recommendations.
Hello, Rose. This is Anne. We do have a question from someone in the audience, and this is what they're saying. So they say, great update of AFCFTA from Rose Ronoh. My question is, now that Kenya and 7 other organizations have been chosen as pilot for the AFCFTA, we see Kenya traded with Ghana. Is there a roadmap how this happens so that the others can follow, provided online, or who should the traders be contacting with in a more practical way, simple for MSMEs, especially women, to follow? So the question is, right, we have seen more of larger companies, very specific countries on the continent, but then now when it comes to smaller SMEs, especially women, how can they duplicate what we're already seeing, the implementation of AFCFTA?
Okay, thank you so much, Anne, for that question. And rightly put, Kenya has been selected as one of the countries that is piloting. And basically a pilot is that we have the CFTA, but before we can say that we want, it's like a car that has just been invented. Before you can say that we want to drive it at 80 kilometers per hour, we want to test drive it to just see what are the challenges that are there, what are the issues that could be there. And that's what's happening right now under the CFTA with those 7 countries. It's a pilot that is facilitating movement of goods from countries that have not traded so much together under this new regime of the CFTA. And what is happening with that pilot is that now Ministry of Trade and in those respective countries, they have selected certain companies, SMEs are part of them, to do the pilot, so that upon the successful completion of a transaction, then challenges are listed down. And those challenges that are listed down, they're able to put in place measures to be able to ensure that the next person who's trading under that regime is not experiencing those challenges. So definitely it's a pilot which involves a few private sector representative companies, SMEs, a few countries. That's why not all African countries are part of the pilot, just to see how this works and what are the challenges that are there. So definitely the next stage would be now to bring everybody on board. And how you prepare yourself is to attend trainings, to be in touch with the Ministry of Trade, to be in touch with your associations, for example, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, KEPSA, CAM. Those associations are the ones which are touch points, the women associations like OWIT. Those are touch points whereby the Ministry of Trade now gives information as often as possible on what happens next. So prepare yourself, prepare your business so that you can be able to take advantage of it. And most importantly, if you already have a destination in mind where you want to export your goods, now is the time to do the market research. Go and find out, you can do it online, or even you can contract somebody to do it, to find out what are the requirements of that market, because you might have a product that you think that will fly in Nigeria. Well, it might not work there because of certain reasons. So as you wait for this pilot to be completed, then you need to prepare yourself by doing market research, improving your product, improving your productive capacity, ensuring that you have the necessary licenses, so that when we say go, then you're ready to go.
Thank you, Rose. Yes, thanks for reminding everybody on the conference that market research is very important, because that's where we see a lot of people don't do that. All right, let me see if there's another question. I don't know if you're able to answer this. The same participant is asking about logistics problem and payment. They say they did not see that when it came to your presentation. And those are some of the challenges that a lot of women face. In fact, it's been a recurring theme all through the 2-day conference. Everybody's saying, look, I get market access, perfect. But when I try to now export it in Africa, that's where the challenge is. The challenge is in logistics. In fact, a lady from Nigeria yesterday said it costs more to transport her goods than the production of the goods. So that's not sustainable, and something that's really affecting women, and also the issue in regards to payment. I think payments you alluded a little bit with PAPs, but maybe you can respond to that as we work on towards the policy recommendations. Thank you, Rose.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, and that's true. That's one of the biggest things. First is access to finance, second is access to information, and then you have the logistical challenges. And I think in my presentation, it came out in the challenges that women traders have highlighted in the consultations that we've had. And this is a challenge that I would say that you need to look at it in terms of long term, because as I mentioned, the colonialists structured infrastructure in Africa to get goods out of Africa. So if you look at the ports, the port of Mombasa was to get goods out of Africa. When you look at, the railway, you look at the infrastructure that we have was not interconnected amongst us African countries. So that is something that unfortunately African countries from the time of colonization until now have not effectively been able to work on. But with the CFTA, there is prioritization that is now happening at the African Union, that now we have, interconnection of utilities such as electricity, plan to have, railway network and road networks across, African countries, looking at, the Yamoussoukro Declaration, which is a air transport liberalization agreement that ensures that, gives rights to airlines to be able to land in the different African countries. So yes, those are the biggest challenges that are there. I think myself, I tried to go and, import some fabrics and nice clothes from Ghana, but when I asked for a quotation from KQ, it was too expensive. So those challenges are there, but we need to look at them in terms of, long term. It's going to be worked on. So what I would advise is that the ITC trade map have a tool. What is it called? It's a tool whereby you can be able to, go and check your product and just see where is the most cost-effective place in terms of transportation, in terms of tariffs, for you to be able to export. So you should also not be very blind to say that now that the CFTA is here, I'm going to take my goods to Nigeria. If it's going to be more expensive, then it doesn't make sense. Then you probably have to wait. It might be, cost effective for some other kind of goods, or even, it might be effective for, services, but, maybe movement. If there's no road network, if the sea is expensive, the air is expensive, then we need to look at other alternatives as we progressively move towards, harmonizing the infrastructure within the African countries. So it's a real challenge. I totally agree with you, but there are tools that can help you. And I also want to mention that I don't think that as East Africa, I want to speak for East Africa, we have even satisfied the potential that is there to export amongst East African countries. Same to ECOWAS. I don't think women have, you have not 100% utilized the potential for you to export, your goods and services within your own regional economic communities. So even as you're practicing and readying yourself for the CFTA, then try first even within your regional economic community to export your good or your service.
Thank you, Rose, for that. In fact, the last thing that you've talked about, not taking advantage of our regional economic communities, is something that was brought up yesterday, whereby a lot of the businesses were encouraged to take advantage of that, and then that lays the foundation, right? So those are the building blocks. So you start regional, then you go continental, and then you go global. So I'm glad to hear that that is something that you and your team at UNECA are encouraging people, because that is how you start. In East Africa, where I'm also based just like you, we have 7 countries, right? We even have DRC that just joined it. I mean, if you want to do business, start there and then build up and take it off. Okay, great, thank you for that. We do have just a couple more questions, and then maybe you can take it from there. There's a question from Beth Mwangi. And Rose, this is her question. Are there any special licenses required for a business to participate in the AFCFTA, or one can use the trade license they already have? So it's around licensing and able to trade cross-border.
Okay, thank you so much, Beth, for that question. It's a really important question, because once you decide you want to export, then it's not like, taking your goods from Keitany to Marikiti here in Nairobi. There are, special, processes, documentations that are required. And yes, depending on the product that you want to export, there are particular licenses that you may need. But first of all, most importantly, you will need an export license, which Kenya Revenue Authority should be able to provide that for you. And the export license is very important, because it guarantees that you're a Kenyan exporter, and that now helps you to get the preferential treatment under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. There are other licenses that are there depending on the products. For example, Kenya Bureau of Standards will grant you specific licenses. You have for the plant and animal, there's sanitary and phytosanitary certificates. Anti-counterfeit. There are quite a number of, so many certifications that are there. Unfortunately, there are so many, but it depends on the product that you have. So you can go to a portal called the InfoTrade portal, www.infotradekenya.go.ke. So this is a portal that you can be able to search a particular product, and then it will give you the different licenses that you need, how much they cost, the different government entities that you need to obtain from them. So that will be very helpful for you to be able to know what you need.
Thank you, Rose, for that clarification. So more information, different licenses, depending on your product, like you said, and export. I hope that answered your question. And I think this is where I'll need your guidance, Rose. There are about 2 more questions, but I know you wanted some more discussions around policy recommendation. Do you have time to take in those 2 questions?
Yeah, I think we can take just the 2, and then we can dedicate the remaining minutes to the discussion on recommendations, because the discussion on recommendations is very important because this agreement is going to be, the protocol is going to be negotiated, and it's really important we hear from you women, what exactly do you want included in that protocol? So I can take the 2 questions and then we can have that discussion.
Actually, there are 3, but let's discuss. So the first question, and I'll say all of them and then you can respond accordingly, right? Okay. Actually, the first one is something you had mentioned earlier, which was about the platform where businesses can be able to get information about costs. Okay, can you please repeat the name of the platform where we can see to where in Africa it is most cost effective to export? So you had mentioned about a platform. Second, there's a question here from Joy Lenz who's asking, how is the AFCFTA protecting African brands? There's a question about brands and specifically women in trade brands or SMEs pretty much. And then the last question is around, it's Funke. She says, great presentation. And her question is, what is the percentage of real practitioners, SMEs involved in the development of these protocols to really reflect on ongoing realities? And I think that is what maybe, Rose, you'll be answering why you're here.
You can repeat that last question, Anne. I didn't get the last one.
So the last question was, what is the percentage of real practitioners, SMEs involved in the development of the protocol in the AFCFTA? For example, in this case, women and youth, to really reflect on ongoing realities. So that is the question around engaging SMEs in the development of these protocols. Is that clear?
Okay. Yes, that's clear.
That is.
So thank you. Okay, thank you, Anne. The platform is ITC Trade Map. So I've just put it there on the chat. And then there's a second one that I had mentioned, the InfoTrade. So let me just type InfoTrade on the chat so that you can pick it up.
And put it to everybody so that everyone can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the previous one I had just sent to you only. So I'm sending it to everyone here. So I've just posted both of them. So the ITC Trade Map is it's basically an online platform that you can be able to go and just see where is the most competitive and cheapest destination for you to send your products. While the InfoTrade portal is an online government portal whereby you can be able to get the licenses and all the requirements that you need to export for your particular product. So on to question number 2, how are SMEs brands protected by the CFTA? They are protected by the Intellectual Property Rights Protocol, which is currently under negotiation. And that protocol will outline basically safeguards that are there to protect all inventions or creations of African businesses, be it SMEs or even the large companies. But I think it's not a one-way, it's a two-way. By two-way, I mean that you shouldn't sit back and wait for your idea to be protected. We have institutions which you can be able to go to patent your idea. For example, in Kenya, we have KIPI, which is the Kenya Intellectual Property Rights Institute. We have the Copyrights Board. So you can be able to be proactive. If you've come across something that you think has not been done anywhere else, then you should be proactive to go and get it registered and patented. Also, we have anti-counterfeit authorities, which are established in most African countries. In Kenya, we have. So manufacturers of particular products can be able to register so that when they are doing their compliance checks, if they find your product has been counterfeited, then they can be able to, ensure that that person is put into book. So yes, there are mechanisms that are there, but it's a two-way. You should not sit back and wait. You should also be able to take steps, because the African government is a big mammoth. They will not come to, 2-3 million SMEs and tell you, can we protect you? It's you now to come halfway. Then the percentage of real SMEs involved in the development of the protocol and basically negotiation of the CFTA, I wouldn't put a number to it, but I would say that we have the important institutions. For example, in Kenya, we have the MSEA. MSEA is Micro, Small, Medium-Sized Enterprise Authority, which is part of the implementation committee. We also have all the private sector associations, the KEPSAs, the CAMs, the chambers. All the private sector associations are part of this. And if you look at most of these private sector associations, they have a particular, focus on SMEs, and they're doing a lot for SMEs. So I would not estimate the percentage, but what I would say is that there's a lot of representation, and there's even so much focus on SMEs to the point of now, I think the big companies are even complaining, because when you look at all opportunities development partners are giving for capacity building, for assistance, they're all either targeting youth, women, or SMEs. So this is actually, it has been overdone. I can tell you that I would not estimate how much, but I think that everybody is looking out, and rightfully, because I think SMEs, if empowered, they can be able to transform Africa. So that would be my answer for the third question.
Thank you, Rose. And I hope, Funke, that answered your question. And maybe just for me to add a little bit, that is why it's very important for you to be, if you are in business, to be part of a business member association, right? Because that is how you use to get your voice heard. Because it's very hard to lobby or engage government as an individual business. But if you go, as Rose has mentioned, private sector association, then now you can be able to advocate for certain things specifically for women or SMEs. So I just wanted to add that. All right, so over to you, Rose. How did you want us to go ahead and discuss about the policy?
I think it's basically simple. And as I explained, this is a protocol. The Women and Youth Protocol is a protocol that specifically is going to be designed to take advantage of some of, to incorporate some of those real changes that we see in terms of the challenges that we come across as African women when it comes to trade. So we can just, you can unmute yourself and, tell us what kind of recommendation you think. And this is really important, as I said, because as UNECA, we are participating in providing advice. So whatever you mention here, I can assure you will get to the negotiating table. So feel free to open up as much as possible.
Great. Yes, so for all of you here, I see a hand up. We'll go ahead and allow, that is Joy's then. So Joy, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and you can be able to ask or respond. Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, Rose. Nice to see you again. We missed you in Cape Town. Next time. Yes, back to that point of Cape Town, because from there, as you know, I ran the Africa Women in Trade, and that was our first expo to meet in Cape Town. What we realized there in real with the entrepreneurs is that the women don't really understand what is trade. Really, what does that really mean? And Anne was also there, and she can confirm that our work was actually helping the women to understand what is trade, because there were, I would say also, there were also medium, small enterprises. We also, the only people who understood trade were those who are in the industrial area, manufacturing, more processing. But the trade, understanding what is trade, because we saw they were all trying to say one-to-one, and they didn't really get it. And not all of them, because some of them we prepared them for 1 year because we had a mixture of all of them, type of women, around 30. But that is something that was a wake-up call that I think it needs to be picked up in the protocol, that as much as we are talking trade, that the basic word trade, the women don't really understand what does that really mean. And it needs to be broken down for them to understand. So that was a big call from my side, which will bring me back to my group of women and have one-to-one to really help them to do that. And it should be really, because what I see, we are the protocol people are really on the higher level, talking quite a lot of things, and the women on the ground are really looking up and saying, okay, and we can attest, we even had some workshop and people don't even turn up because probably it was too much and they don't know what to do with all that information, right? And yet it was meant for them. Like we had B2B discussion where they're pitching and being given information from a buyer side. And if they're not yet understanding the whole process, even to get there, it will not help us to reach anywhere, even if we have a protocol. So we need to get out to the basics. That's something that I wanted to tell you about. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joy. I totally, I think I agree with you. Majority of women are still not they've not yet understood trade. They don't know the processes, they don't have the confidence, and they also do not have the support. So I think this is an important thing that should go into the protocol, that we have mechanisms to ensure that, women are facilitated to understand the complexities of trade in their respective nations.
And just to mention on that is that, sorry, Anne, I'm just going to I think it's important now that it's very fresh in my mind, it's just a few weeks ago, is that sometimes maybe we are pushing the women too much. Maybe they are just good at just doing what they're doing, preparing the product. But we need a middle organization or institution to help to digest those information that they cannot. So their work is to produce the product and have it bought by whoever want to buy, whether it's a middleman or whatever you want to call them, because that's what they're good at. The next is too much for them to follow all those paperwork and legals and authority, but they are ready and they want to go. But that should also be incorporated. I call them the aggregators, or whatever you want to call them, middlemen or whatever. The people look at them negative, but I think after going through all that, there is need of another middle body that will help the women to move in that level. So yeah, back to you. Thanks. Sorry, Anne, too many questions, but I think that's enough.
No. It's actually fine. And maybe Rose, I can chime in a little bit about that. Earlier, in the previous section, we're talking about digital trade, and we're highlighting various brands, African brands, people who are taking advantage of digital trade. So there's a young lady there called Mona, who has a brand called Moby Leather. She's in the leather industry. And what she said that she does is that she works with the informal artisans, right? So what like, I think what Joy is saying is, like you said, you said 70% of the businesses are informal, right? So that informal person, there's no way they can be able to participate in a larger scale in the intra-Africa trade or global trade. But in this case, there's now Mona with Moby Leather. She's a woman. She can be able to be supported for her now to export, because now she's doing things digitally, so she's able to trade in Africa and globally. So the question or the protocols or what we need to do is, how do we engage with the women? And I think that's what the whole session is, who are formally registered, people who have businesses, and not spend so much time on the informal to try and get them to do trade. We should support the women who have the capability of doing intra-Africa trade, and then get them to have this informal trade as part of their supply chain. right? Is that, I think, is that something that can be put on the protocol? Because one of the biggest challenges the informal women have is the fact that they cannot access affordable funding, right? And you say that's a big challenge. They cannot afford, they can't get effective logistics because their scale is very little. They cannot access information. There's a challenge with digital infrastructure. So if maybe that could go in the women and youth protocol around engaging women and youth who have the ability to actually scale up to formal SMEs, but then have a point where they need to be working with the informal economy. I just got to add that because that was something that was actually brought up at the past session where we were talking about digital trade. I don't know what your thoughts are or what UNECA is doing in that particular space, because you said a lot of work is being done for SMEs right now, it's being overdone, but maybe the side that is not working, we need to find a solution on what is working, because now we're going continental. Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Anne. And what you've said is perfectly right. In fact, whenever I train, I normally say that export is not for everyone. You know, it's not everybody has to export. You can be part of a value chain without necessarily doing the export process, and that's where the aggregators come in, the middlemen come in, and I think really this is a space, a really new space, or a green space, especially for former women, women who are already doing formal businesses, because they can be able to connect to the women who are doing informal businesses, and have them improve the quality of their products, have them focus on particular kind of commodities that are in demand, because a lot of them are doing trade but not looking at the dynamics of the design, the quality, what is demanded. So I think that's a really green space that women in formal trade can be able to take advantage, to become the aggregators, to be able to help in ensuring that down the value chain you have women who are in informal trade that might not necessarily be able to export, can export indirectly through the assistance of aggregators. So that is a really valid point, that we need to have aggregators, we need to have value chains that are not only targeted at exporting, even at the lowest level. So probably looking at capacity building in two different ways, whereby you have the formal traders, you are focusing on capacity building for export and also giving them access to finance and markets, while those at the lower levels, the interventions can be targeted at, bettering their product, bettering their skills, so that you have an efficient value chain. And as UNECA, we are working with SMEs. There's a group of SMEs that we are working with on this. And I think we can have further discussions on this and to see how we can be able to leverage on that space, specifically for women who are in formal trade, to be that bridge that is needed.
Perfect, great. We look forward, and I know Joy and the work that she's doing at AWT will be able to engage further. Rose, we do have Funke. She's the lady who asked earlier about SME participation. So let me go ahead and have Funke ask her question, because I guess, okay, I don't want to speak for her. Funke, Rose here is listening to you in regards to the suggestion.
Thank you very much, Anne, for this lovely conference. And thank you very much, Rose, for that presentation. That was very clear. Thank you. And please, I'm coming to you this afternoon to appeal to you as a technocrat, because you have a key role to play in this implementation of AFCFTA. In the sense of this issue of logistics, please, I'm not really overemphasizing it, but it is a deep pain point. And we know in the various protocols we've seen under the AFCFTA, I have not actually seen one specifically targeted towards logistics. We have transportation. They are slightly different because maybe as a technocrat, or we have quite a lot of social entrepreneurs. I'm talking of real entrepreneurs. You take, I'll just give you very two short examples. Anne knew, quite a lot of people knew. We were in Cape Town. I sent some goods that was to be used for exhibition on the 10th of October. Those samples, with every effort I made, every effort, I'm paying so much. They only arrived South Africa 2 days ago. They arrived Cape Town 2 days ago, from the 12th of October. That is one issue. And that was after paying so much money, okay? I'm pulling all sorts of strings. That was one thing. But the most important thing is I've had a few customers. One, we were even afraid to charge for transportation from Lagos. And that was sending goods to the UK, because by the time we were going to charge for transportation, they wouldn't even be able to sell it in that price. Nobody will go out to buy products in the UK because it's coming from Nigeria. They first of all look at the price. So if you are outpricing yourself, you are not in business. That was one thing that we had to pay for the transportation. The other ones that we said, okay, you pay for transportation, they've become quite reluctant, even in going ahead. So these are real issues. If we are going to have trade, logistics has to be looked into, because to me, it seems that is an, what do you call it? Is a mafia. And it's killing trading in Africa. And I have to be very honest with you. So we need that, and I'm appealing to you now as a technocrat that has influence on AFC, we need a protocol on logistics issue. If we are going to move forward within this inter-African trading, and it's not only sending stuff to UK or to abroad, within our continent itself, is more or less impossible. So please, this is my own plea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Funke. We have taken note of that, and that we are going to really emphasize on that. And even in logistics, I think a lot of studies have been done that that has shown that it is harder for women to navigate logistics than men. So I think in the protocol for women, we need to be able to have, some recommendations that ensure that women are facilitated or even given preferential treatment when it comes to aspects of logistics. So that is well received, Funke. Thank you so much for that contribution.
Thank you very much, Rose. Thank you.
Great. Rose, we have a question here from Banu Khan. Let me go ahead and ask to unmute. So Banu, you can go ahead and let me see if I can unmute you. Go ahead and ask or suggest your recommendation to Rose Ronoh and the UNECA team.
All right, thank you so much, Anne. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne, for inviting me. And thank you, Rose, for also just a few minutes ago sharing the link with me. I was able to join today, and I'm really happy to be part of this conversation. So as a Kenyan woman who has worked for very many years on the field of empowering women from both from the perspective of gender and inclusion, I think this is a very timely conversation, and a lot of learning has happened for me today, and I hope all those other listeners out there. Now, my question or my suggestion, Rose, because you are working on the protocol on women and youth, is really how do we ensure that we are truly listening to the voices of the traders that we have in mind, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises, whether they are owned or led by women, youth and other inclusion through another inclusion lens. So I'm talking about bringing in not just looking at these micro enterprises from a homogeneous point of view, but looking at it from a diversity point of view, so persons with disability, young women and women living in rural areas, because their needs, their priorities, their challenges might be different, even internally displaced persons. So looking at it from a more holistic point of view and trying deliberately to bring these voices to the table, because we can talk here as much as we want, but what are the real lived experiences are of those who are in the business. Now, I want to give one example. Just recently, about 2 days ago, we had a workshop in Naivasha with my organization, and there was one young lady who was invited to speak. She's a very young person, about maybe in her early 20s, a very smart, intelligent young woman who has started a business in producing crisps out of coconut. So she's making, she's a producer of chips, coconut chips, and she's supplying to some country in Europe. And she was explaining, as an entrepreneur, first-time entrepreneur, her biggest challenge and nightmare was around the issue of licensing, the numerous numbers of licenses required, the cost involved, and for a person who is just entering the field, how to navigate that space. She was explaining her nightmare of having to move from office to office to look for, and nobody to give her the real information, meaning information is there, it's scattered. Some people are willing to share, others are not willing to share. And so her nightmare to really look and figure it out for herself. So that was the first thing about licenses. The second thing, which for me was intriguing, was the aspect of contracts. How to then enter into legal contracts, because this means, when you're doing export, you are entering into legal contracts. So how then to be able to have that information that you are not going to be conned, you can read a contract and you are protecting yourself and your company, and you are not being taken for a ride. So even that contracting element is something that I thought I should share here. And I mean, for me, of course, if she was present herself, would be a better account. But yeah, Rose, and there are so many other things from a gender perspective that I have in mind. Particularly, is there anything like a target that is going to be set for women, just like we have in procurement, public procurement in Kenya? And how will then we monitor that target? I'm thinking 10 years ahead, because we need to really put rigorous monitoring mechanisms in place so that when we are tracking what is happening in the implementation of this agreement, we are able to say with confidence that, it's working, it's not working, this is where we are having problems, and this is where we need to shake and move. Sorry, it was a bit long, but my passion is what drives me. And Rose, thank you once again, and thank you, Anne, as well. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Banu, for that. In terms of the diversification, we squarely realize that women are not a homogeneous population. We have women in the rural areas, in the urban areas. We have, we are very diverse. We have younger women, we have older women, middle-aged women. So in terms of the engagement that we have been doing and consultations, we have been taking into consideration this and ensuring that in the participation of all this, we have women from all different, kind of, representation. We have cross-border women traders who come into our meetings. We have women, informal women traders. We have formal. We have women from the big, CEOs from the big farms. So in terms of engagement, that is happening a lot, but I cannot guarantee that it is happening at the national level in all African countries, but it's the best practice that even as you're coming up with an implementation strategy, you do not just look at women as one, but look at, the different representations and the different, classifications and demographics that women are there. So that's important. And it's an aspect that we can capture in our recommendations. In terms of the licenses, that is real. Yes, we have multiple licenses. We have different payments, it's really difficult and complex. And this, comes together with the issue that Funke has mentioned of logistics. So I think that is something that we've taken in that needs to be put into consideration in the protocol, that we reduce the licenses, we make it simpler for them, to apply, and just making it easier for trade. In terms of the legal contracts, that this is a really good and new addition. And it's true that women really are taken advantage of at times, whereby you might not be able to afford to get a legal representative. So you will accept maybe a buyer's contract which later might come back and bite you. So, but in the interim, International Trade Center offers model contracts, free model contracts that you can be able to use and customize, for yourself. So I think that's something that you can look at as we are waiting, but I think this is something that we're going to look at it. It is possible that maybe we can develop model contracts, that can be used in the CFTA for traders, so that it makes it easier and even cuts down the legal costs involved with those contracts. Then in terms of public procurement, you've mentioned something really important that has come across in many consultations that we have done. In Dar es Salaam, when we were there for the Women and Youth Conference, this came up that we have the 30% that has been reserved for women, youth, and persons with disability. And our proposal for the protocol is to, increase this percentage possibly to even 50% reserved for this particular, for women, youth, and persons with disability. So that's a really important point. Then in terms of monitoring and evaluation, as I mentioned, UNECA, we are providing technical assistance to countries when it comes to developing their implementation strategies. And we provide the template for the implementation strategy. And in the template is a monitoring and evaluation matrix that has been put there, and also a risk matrix and a communication plan. So that just ensures that after the 3 years of implementation of that plan, we can go back and look at that M&E framework and see, did we achieve what we intend to achieve? Same at the continental level. UNECA is also tracking the commitments that are being made at the CFTA level, and is doing country indexes. So within a period of time, we'll be reporting on a biannual, every 2 or 3 years, in terms of progress each country is making on the commitments that they've made on the CFTA. So in terms of M&E, this is already in place at national level and also at the continental level. I hope I've answered your question, Banu, and thank you for joining, even if I sent you a link a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Yes, you answered very nicely, and I really do hope that some of these recommendations will go into this extremely important protocol for the empowerment of women and young women and youth in Africa.
Thank you, Banu. Right. So Rose, there are about 2 more questions here, and I see a hand up, and then we can go ahead to the next session, or at least wrap up. All right. So so the first question is from Lungile Ginitza. Okay, I don't know if it's a question or it's something that you can answer, but let me just read it out. How can you help me? I normally attend exhibitions like SciTech or Africa Health Exhibition in South Africa, only to find those exhibitors are looking for distributors in Eswatini, for instance, only to find that I don't have finance. Say I have the idea to bring whatever I saw there, only to find that I don't have the finance. How can you assist me gain confidence, start trading with manufacturers from other countries abroad? So the issue here is seeing opportunity, not having finance, and actually attending the trade exhibitions that we recommend them to attend, but it's still a challenge to do that. How can UNECA support capacity building or access to affordable finance for an SME like Lungile?
Okay, thank you so much, Lungile. In terms of access to finance, UNECA is doing research just to understand the challenges that women are faced when it comes to access to finance. And there's a study that we have recently just completed. And the study just indicated that women are self-denying when it comes to access to finance. By self-denying, I mean that they have an assumption that if I go to the bank is not going to give me money. So I don't know, it's because they've heard from other people, is it their own experiences? So there is a high percentage of self-denial whereby you already have made up your mind that even if I go to the bank that I'm not going to get this particular facility. Secondly is that access to finance is also subject to how well you keep your records and how formal is your business. So have you formalized your business? Do you have a certificate of registration? Do you pay your taxes? Do you do your accounts, annual accounts? Are they audited? Do you bank? Whenever you're doing yourselves, do you bank? Do you have a bank account that you can be able to see, a trail of how you're doing business? Then these are the things that banks look at before they can be able to consider whether you're a high-risk customer or a customer that will be able to pay back. So you need to also prepare yourself. And for you to be able to trade, I would say you need to start small. If it is a product that you have, first of all, could you try in your local market and see if you can be able to gain traction in terms of sales in your local market before you can say you go into international trade? Because if you can be able to be successful in your local market, then you have creditors and bankers much more willing to support you to go even into an international market. But that aside, I'm not discouraging you to go for exhibitions. It's important that you go for exhibitions. As UNECA, we sponsor women to go for exhibitions. I think we were with some women here in Dar es Salaam, sponsored by UNECA. Also OWIT, we sponsored OWIT conference in Abuja. We've sponsored quite a number of women to just go to conferences, to go to exhibitions, the Intra-Africa Trade Fair that was there. So we provide that support, but I need to emphasize that we work with registered, private sector associations or women associations to be able to provide these sponsorships. And it's not all the time that we have the money to do it, but whenever we have, we reach out and we are able to do the sponsorship. So that is in terms of that. I also know Keproba, for example, if you're in Kenya, Keproba is a Kenya Export and Branding Agency, also has their registered SMEs or registered women are able to get an opportunity to attend these exhibitions. ABSA and I think some banks also have some clubs, business clubs that organize these trips for you to go out there and see what is there to be offered. So I always say that everything is at your fingertips if you can only just take that step and just be resilient and continue to knock the door. One day something's going to open up.
Great, thank you, Rose, for that, and I believe that's answered her questions. There's a question here from Bunakukala Lamini. Her question is for you, Rose. I'm not sure if I missed the issues around gender quotas or set aside for women and youth that should be included in the protocol to ensure that countries subscribe to such as a form of preferential treatment. Gender quotas.
So yes.
Procurement, yeah, for women and youth.
Yes. So I think you can look at it in two ways. She's brought up a very interesting thing. You can look at it from the point of view of procurement, but also you can look at it from the point of view of of general trade, whereby you give some preferential quotas for trade for women. So I think it's a really important point. We talked about the one for procurement, but in the one that maybe countries set aside, I think that's something really new that we can be able to explore and even have more discussions about it, whereby even if maybe a quota has been established, then you have a larger quota being there for women for purposes of maybe affirmative action. So that's a really good point.
Thank you. So that's good. That can be included in the work that you're doing at UNECA. Before I get to Joy, there's also a question here from Banu, who was speaking earlier. You mentioned earlier that we've overdone the training of SMEs. I don't think we've overdone. Maybe we should focus more on the formal SMEs, but that's just me. But her question is, a lot of investment has been done in this space. Women and youth who are mostly the owners of these SMEs in the area of access to finance. So her question is, what do we need to do that is not the same old training, right? We say it's been overdone, but things are still the same. The women, like the lady earlier from southern part of Africa, is saying, look, I'm seeing opportunities, I can't take advantage of them because I lack the finance, right? I'm doing my part, I'm going to these trade exhibitions, I'm able to access market, but my issue here is finance. Now, she's probably gone through training. What more can be done? What more needs to be done by UNECA and your team to ensure that when these women and these youth get this opportunity, they can close the deal, because the closing of the deal, the real business part is what is lacking. So maybe
thank you so
answer
much.
that about training.
Yeah, thank you so much. And UNECA is a policy advisory institution. So what we do is that we note this. That's why we participate in these engagements. We note some of these things that you bring up. And not only do we bring it to the attention of government when it comes to policy making, we actually do research and to just find out exactly where does the problem stem from. And from this research, then we have empirical evidence to engage governments to tell them that this is not, this is not going right, and you need to change this, you need to do this. So that's the intervention that UNECA does. But I just want to speak now as an independent person on what needs to be done. Yeah, maybe the training has been overdone, everybody is doing it. I think the next step should be incubation, acceleration, handholding, export preparation. That should be the next stage. The information has been given and probably will continue doing that. But we need development partners now to focus on maybe identifying a few businesses, like you identified 20 businesses owned by women. And not only do you, train them, but now you handhold them to, be prepared to export. So if it's a product, you help them to refine that product. If it's access to finance, you hold their hand and ensure that they are able to access finance through grants, or even their businesses are eligible to get this. So I think that's the next stage that needs to happen. That once you have trained, then the next step is to enable, is to coach and mentor and handhold, incubate, so that you're having, even if it is 100 businesses moving from just awareness and capacity building, but now they are actually going to do the trade. So that's from a personal point of view that I think development partners now need to move, and governments need to move away from just giving information and waiting for women to take advantage of it. A lot of women are marginalized, they don't have confidence, they have fear, they have, they find maybe export is being, is risky. They have no knowledge of it. The logistics are very complex. So I think that should be the next frontier, identifying a few and hand-holding them through the first 2 or 3 processes. That way, then now you're having that, information that you're giving and training and capacity building actually making sense. So that would be my suggestion.
I agree, Rose, and I think that's a great suggestion. Something that we did at the Regal Africa Business Institute, which is part of the Regal Africa group. We actually went to banks and said, let's identify these businesses that are exporting or have the potential for export, and let's incubate them and go through this program. But then we realized a lot of people are focused on still sharing information. A lot of women will tell me, I know what to do, but I need technical assistance, or I need the help to go to the next level. So I'm glad that you have mentioned that, and I hope that is something post-event, post the Africa Trade Conference, that's something that we at the Regal Africa Group, plus UNECA, plus you, or anyone in the trade ecosystem can really look at and say, look, how do we incubate these women, right? How do we put those, even those who are already exporting, maybe they're exporting in East Africa, now we're telling them, beyond your regional economic community, how to go to the continent. So looking forward to engaging with that. Because of time, let me go ahead and just have Joy ask her question. And then we will then, I think we have one more question. No, sorry, this is not a question, it's just a comment. It's from the lady who had asked the question earlier. And she said she's happy that you, Rose, have mentioned the need for incubation and mentorship aspects. And then she says, I want to ask on the issue of gender data capturing system to inform policy and program. Maybe you can answer that, then we go to Joy. The question is, okay, gender data capturing. How do we know these businesses are really for women, and how does that inform policy and programs?
Thank you so much. And that's something I think was an oversight on my part. I should have put it in my presentation. One of the biggest, challenges that prevent, gender equality, from making progress is the lack of gender disaggregated data. And by gender disaggregated or sex disaggregated data, I mean that a lot of research that is done is gender blind, looking at people as people, but not looking at people as women and men, and, having different challenges are affected by life. in different ways. So this is a really big issue, and it's one of the recommendations that we are making to go into the protocol, that countries should be proactive to be able to collect gender disaggregated data, analyze this data, and use this data for purposes of policy making. So this is a weakness that we still have. We are still not yet 100% in terms of ensuring that the data that we are collecting and analyzing looks at how issues affect men and women differently, and putting in place intervention mechanisms to ensure gender equality. So that's a very valid point. Thank you so much for raising it.
Perfect. We'll go ahead to Joy. Joy, can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question and recommend what needs to go into the agenda. Hopefully, the Women in Youth Protocol. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I just forgot one of the most important one that actually, because I'm talk more of the basic, really the basics. So and also with the practicability with the African Women in Trade, especially the last meeting we had, we noticed that people don't know about the AFCFTA at all. We had actually to help them to pronounce AFCFTA. It's that so many businesses don't know about AFCFTA, and leave alone the women gender protocol. So there is need, very big need for using the media that we are having already existing, the radios, the presenter, even a network like ours, to really have a budget for just awareness, because the continent, to be honest, they were not aware what is AFCFTA, and I'm talking about South Africa, and these were already manufacturing companies, and these are the people we are women we want to target as AFCFTA in the trade. And as you know, they are very busy in their area of work, that they will miss out some of this communication for sure. But I think there is more in need of media to be added in the protocol, in the preposition, that they have to be a budget for media to share information about AFC. Otherwise, it's not reaching to the right people that really need it. And also going deeper into networks that have these women who can really make use of all the information and can already digest this the whole idea of going into trade under AFCFTA. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to inform, because we notice it's not happening, and actually we partnered with one of the media in South Africa that is going to do that. In terms of having regular, because that's why we noticed even South Africa was not part of the pilot. They had no idea what is that in the first place. So they don't even have it in their B2B networks. Yeah, it's not in the discussion. So it's very good to add that communication needs, there has to be, I don't know, it has to be a budget, but I don't know how you think about that, how to implement it in, because it's not going down where it's needed, and only media can help that. Thank you. That was it from my side.
Okay, so I just want to make a comment on that. I mentioned that UNECA is providing technical assistance in the developing of the implementation strategies, and a component of each implementation strategy for a country has a communication and visibility plan. So that communication and visibility plan has also been mainstreamed for gender, so that you're not just communicating blankly. Like, for example, you're putting an advert on 7 o'clock news for the CFTA, while that's the time a woman is cooking or taking care of her kids. So gender sensitive or gender responsive communication is part of the implementation of the CFTA, both at the continental level and also at the national level. So it's really important, because one of the biggest challenges we have is access to information. And I think a huge percentage of why we have lack of access to information is because we are not communicating these, policies and opportunities and these agreements to the platforms that, are patronized mostly by women, maybe WhatsApp, maybe churches, maybe, through, ways whereby women can be able to get this information. So that is a really good contribution, Joy, and we have taken note of that. Secondly, also, you've talked about that women they're not aware about this CFTA, and I just want to mention that on the 30th of this month, we are going to have a webinar, a free webinar, to educate or to create awareness about what the CFTA is, opportunities that are there, the key provisions, benefits, operationalization, and basically preparing SMEs. So this is targeted at SMEs. It's going to be there on 30th. I'm putting the link on the chat, so you can pick out that link and keep it. And then on 30th at 10 o'clock, you can join. Or even you can share with somebody who you feel that would benefit from this. So we're going to be training. We're going to be training, but this is not for UNECA. This is for an organization called CIPE SIPE, who have engaged me as a trainer to basically capacity build on the CFTA. So I have put the link to that meeting on the chat, which is going to be on 30th of November at 10 o'clock. So you can pick it up there. Welcome for the training.
Great, thank you, Rose. And yes, and please share that with, I know you've shared it also, but you can send it to our team and we'll share it to our network, because this information is necessary. That is why we also do the Africa Trade Conference, because we have to transform people's minds. We have to give them the right information. I am so surprised. Everyone I talk to, it's like they're very intimidated. They're intimidated by trade. So that's why I have a feeling that if we find a substantial number of women and there are more success stories, and we have the right policy, very focused on women, and we have the success stories, then the rest will follow. Otherwise, right now, it's very unattainable for most women, so they shy off. But in the meantime, we tell them be part of the value chain, right? Or be part of it in some other way. So share with us that information and we'll be glad to share it in our network to all the people who are interested in the trade space. There are a few comments here, and then now you will guide us on the way forward. So we do have here where Banu says we need to she agrees with the rules. We need to move the needle to the next frontier. Success stories will inspire others, and hopefully we'll be able to support even more women. And by doing so, elevate poverty and lead our youth to dignified and full jobs. I agree. She says, great idea, Joy, about information sharing on media. So it's just a lot of comments. She asks Rose, which are the 7 pilot countries and what does pilot mean? What does being a pilot country mean in practice? And I believe she's talking about the AFCFTA, but let me ask the next question. There's a question here that says, I hope the protocol will also include gender-sensitive budgeting. And so those are the 2 things. One, the 7 pilot countries for the AFCFTA, what does pilot mean? And the second question is around gender-sensitive budgeting.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. In terms of the countries that are part of the pilot, we have Kenya, we have Cameroon, we have Egypt, we have Ghana, we have Mauritius, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Tunisia. So these are the countries that are part of the pilot. And what the pilot is, actually it's not called a pilot, it's called a guided trade initiative. So when you go and check it online, it's called a guided trade initiative. It's basically a test. It's just testing the operational, institutional, legal, and trade policy environment in these countries to see how it's going to work. So it's like a dry run of how trade will happen. So these are the countries that have volunteered. So it was not the countries were not selected, but the countries volunteered themselves based on how ready they were in terms of the agreement. And some of the products that are part of the initiative, it includes ceramic tiles, batteries. I think Kenya actually did the first transaction under the pilot between Kenya and Ghana, whereby Chloride Exide did transaction on batteries, tea and coffee, processed meats, cornstarch, sugar, pasta, glucose syrup, dried fruits, sisal fiber, amongst others are part of the products that are part of this. So it is a dry run to see, are there any operational issues, institutional challenges, legal, trade policy environment. It's just to see that everything is okay before we can say, let's roll it out now to all countries. So the second contribution is a really important contribution, gender sensitive budgeting, because you can have a policy that says, yes, we are gonna, do this 1, 2, 3, affirmative action, put policies in place. But if those policies are not supported financially or with resources, then they are just empty. You will not see any progress. So I think these are really important things that can go into the protocol, that in addition to all the good things that we are proposing, these nations should also commit, member states should commit to gender responsive budgeting.
Perfect, great. So because of time, Rose, I don't see any more questions from the Q&A and no more hands up. So I'll take it over to you and your team to then let us know, based on the conversations we've had this afternoon, what next. Thank you, Rose.
So thank you so much. I have my colleague Caroline with me here, and Caroline will just summarize our discussions, and these discussions will inform the report which we submit that will be part of preparations for the Women and Youth Protocols. So Caroline, you're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a very informative and session this afternoon, and thank you for also taking the time to give us so much more that we need to discuss. We had initially wanted to go through this session differently in terms of getting feedback via a questionnaire. But from the discussions that we've had, we've really gotten quite a few points that we believe will actually form part of the protocol. As Rose has mentioned, ours is also to give feedback from members of the private sector and all those who are interested in the AFCFTA to ensure that the protocol actually is built and based on the experiences on the ground. So one of the items that we have captured, there's quite a bit. There's logistics that came through. That's something that we need to ensure is put across. Rose mentioned how the protocol has listened and actually tried to bring in some of those items that we have talked about in transport. I think the concern was that logistics has not been given the eye that it requires, and I think that's what we'll push forward to ensure that it's captured. We talked about facilitation, aggregation. Who are the contact points? Who are we talking to? And is it easier and better for us to be talking to the aggregators rather than the informal business traders? We talked about, okay, Joy actually mentioned the fact that women don't understand what the term trade means. And I think she recommended using aggregators, or at least middlemen who are able to understand what it is that we want to get benefit of the trade. And Banu, if I'm not wrong, sorry if I have mispronounced the name, talked about how are we being able to listen to the MSMEs? Are we engaging with all the diverse ways that women present themselves, the rural women, internally displaced women, women with people with disabilities, and ensuring that we are able to get the real lived experiences. And I think from the conversations that we've had this afternoon, we've had examples of the challenges and actually even some solutions. And this will also enable us to put this across as far as the protocol is concerned. We talked about how we monitor and track progress, specifically for AFCFTA. And Rose mentioned how we're doing this with the risk matrix. She's talked about the M&E framework that already exists and what is happening in the country level as far as the implementation committees are concerned. Access to finance has been talked about. It's something that has cut across, I think, even in the sessions before ours, and I think it will also come up in many other sessions. It's something that recurs. And Rose mentioned the projects that have been going on and the research in access to finance and the self-denying aspects, which I think sometimes is not something that we talk about loudly, but we all have a responsibility. And I think it was important to actually note that as much as we feel we don't have access, we also sometimes self-sabotage. She talks about preparing ourselves to be able to beat this opportunity. It has been emphasized, and I think it's something that will continue being emphasized, that the AFCFTA is bringing an opportunity for African businesses to grow within the continent. But how do we prepare ourselves to meet this opportunity? She talked about formalizing businesses and how we need to gain traction in our local market before we can actually go regional. There was a point on gender quotas, specifically on procurement and preferential treatment, affirmative action. I think that's a point that will definitely be put across to move the conversation forward and how it can contribute to the protocol on women and youth. And lastly, I think gender data capturing systems, that it was important to ensure that gender disaggregated data is actually captured to be able to be to inform policy development, not only in national level, but also regional and also continental. The other issue we've talked about is communication, and how do we communicate the knowledge of the AFCFTA within the existing media. And we've talked about ensuring that the communication plan at the national level actually is very gender sensitive. Rose has actually gone into details of the same. And then lastly, we've talked about the pilot program. Yes, and the guided, as Rose has mentioned, the right word for it is the guided trade initiative, and how countries volunteered for this. And then lastly, it's just a commitment that she's mentioned that state parties need to make to ensure that we have gender responsive budgeting. I believe I have captured all the information that has come across, unless Rose has something else she'd like to contribute to the rest of the members. Thank you.
And I think that's perfectly captured. So that will inform our report, just to ensure that the discussions we've had here are not just discussions, because a lot of times we've been accused of having so many meetings, so many Zooms, so many discussions, which don't go anywhere. But what we can promise you is that this is something that will make it to the negotiating table. So thank you so much. Over to you, Anne.
All right, thank you, Rose. Thank you, Caroline, for summarizing the discussions that we've had this afternoon, showcasing the challenges that the practitioners are saying they're there, but also the solutions that came out. And as Rose has said, even after the report, it's not a talk shop. We want to see action right after this. So thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing what is put in the protocol that will support more women and the youth to do trade sustainably on the continent and beyond. So thank you very much for that.